Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Economic Empowerment Podcast. Today, I'm really honored to introduce Professor Jeffrey Sachs, one of the greatest economists of our time, the president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Columbia University professor, renowned author, and welcome.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Yeah, and I was reading your book of Ethics in Action for Sustainable Development. And in chapter one, you mentioned how the low income developing countries are getting their back turned on by wealthier countries such as the US when asking for funding to complete the SDGs. So, what are some measures that we could do as the citizens for the wealthier countries?
Well, let me just say the kinds of things that should be done, in my opinion, are things like the Belt and Road Initiative of China,
Yep.
because the Chinese government recognized that for China's own well being, but also the well being of its neighbors, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and so forth, and countries even farther afield, uh, all economies need modern infrastructure. And modern infrastructure means access to high quality electricity, especially zero carbon energy now, to fast rail, to fiber, 5G networks, and so forth. And the Belt and Road Initiative, which is in its 10th year, uses especially finance from China, from the China Development Bank and other institutions, to help finance the spread of infrastructure across Eurasia and across the sea routes, also connecting Africa and South America and East Asia. So that's a very good example. It's pragmatic, it's investment oriented. It doesn't just talk the talk, it actually provides the financing and provides the technology. I wish the rich countries in the West were doing this. They are the former colonial powers. They behaved badly when they were the colonial powers, and they're not behaving very well as the post colonial
Right.
powers. They're not really stepping up to their responsibility.
Right, because I was just in China like for 2 months, and I think it really strengthens the businesses of carbon peaking by 2030 and carbon neutralization by 2050. But I feel like the United States haven't done enough of promoting this ideology of carbon neutrality. So how, as citizens ourselves, can push for those changes?
It's interesting. In the United States, most people know that climate change is a very serious crisis, and we just had the devastating fires in Hawaii to show how tragic this climate change is. We're in the hottest period in not only recorded uh, history, but in human history for the last 125,000 years. The month of July was probably the single hottest month ever that humanity has experienced. Certainly, that's true during the period of recorded temperatures. So, we should be doing much more. And the American people know this. And certain things are happening, of course. There's investment in green energy in a lot of places. There's investment in the conversion of the auto industry to electric vehicles, which is part of the solution. At the national level, there was a piece of legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a very strange name for legislation which is mainly centered on the energy transformation, and it gives tax breaks for green energy. But what it doesn't do is make a national plan. There
Right,
is no national plan.
right,
It doesn't make a national plan because in American politics, the power of the fossil fuel lobby, big oil and big coal, is so strong that politicians don't tell the truth to their own constituents, and they act on behalf of their lobbies who pay for their campaigns rather than on behalf of the American people. In the United States Senate, in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, the chairman Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, is notorious for being the front for the big oil lobby. And he himself has family wealth tied up in two coal companies.
Right.
So I regard that as corruption, but in the American system, it's legal corruption, or seems to be legal, but it's corruption not nonetheless. If you're told that in a country that hasn't taken a clear plan for decarbonization has senior officials who own coal companies, you'd say, well, of course, that's just political corruption. But unfortunately, that's how the United States works. So the American people are saying more and more, we're disgusted with the political system. It's all about money. It's all about the reelection of these corrupt politicians.
Right.
And I think that the more we clarify how broken this is, the farther we're going to get. But of course, at substantive levels, we need a plan of action to decarbonize by 2050 that is not only at the state level, because many states have such plans taking shape, but at the federal level. And one of the main lessons of what's happening right now is that there are more projects in more projects in wind and solar
Yep.
than can be put onto the grid, because the real breakdown is the transmission system. But that's where federal investment and a federal plan is needed. And we don't have that because of all the political problems that I talked about.
And I think that America's structure is so like money based, money focused, that it comes before the mutual benefits that all the human can get. It's
That's
always,
exactly right.
yeah, it's
It's
always, yeah,
it's not based on the common good. It's based on the special interest.
right. It's always money, money, money. And then I want to touch on this is that we all know that Japanese is going to have a nuclear wastewater dumps. So what are some actions that United Nations would do to counter this type of behavior?
Well, on the specifics on Japan, I can't really comment because I haven't studied the scientific arguments on both sides. And in general, on technical arguments, I tend to listen to the range of experts and ask their opinion. So I would think at a minimum what the UN should be doing, and maybe it is, and I'm just not involved at all in it, is looking at through the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is based in Vienna, at this question of the wastewater from Fukushima and what should be done about it, because that's a technical issue that should not be any individual government's authority. The UN should weigh in, especially at the technical level. But in general, we have some pretty clear needs that are urgent, whether it's the decarbonization or protecting the ecosystems from pollution or from over harvesting or from waste. And we need technical plans of action. But that planning mechanism is hard work. And it's hard work for the political reason of keeping it free from corruption. And it's hard work at the technical level because a lot of technical issues are raised. And so countries need effective planning ministries. China has the National Development and Reform Commission, NDRC, which does a lot of the technical planning. And the United States doesn't have a planning
Correct.
ministry. So we don't make plans because we don't have a ministry of planning or a ministry of economy or a planning agency. In the US lexicon, planning is a bad idea. But, for certain things, I am happy that planning is done within private businesses. But for other things, I want the planning to be done by government. And in every sphere of the economy, planning is essential. It's just that sometimes it's not a government function, sometimes it's a private sector function.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the United States government needs to go through a really big structural change. And in that, I think the driving forces are the Gen Z and Gen Alpha people coming up. But right now, I think we lack guidance. So what are some advices that you would guide, like some advices that you would give us to start with?
Well, that's a really very interesting and deep question because uh, let me just say that our Constitution was drafted in 1787. Of course, it's had some amendments since then, but basically it's the same structure that was decided in 1787. And it's out of date. It doesn't have the substantive principles that are needed for the modern period, and it does not enable the strong planning or environmental protection or assurance of economic rights for the people. So it's really an out of date structure in many, many ways. At the same time, it has been uh, deeply damaged by uh, corruption, by the money in the politics. So I would make many changes, but I think uh, the idea should be that sustainable development, that means an economy that works for the common good and that protects the environment
Yeah.
and that provides the public services that anyone needs, whether it's health or education, that these are part of the citizens' rights and responsibilities, and that the government has the effective means to carry that out without the corruption of private money in politics is central. And I think, as you say, today's young people are going to really need to fix the U.S. system because
Yeah.
otherwise it's just going to continue to be in decline.
And yeah, I think currently another problem with the US is that it's basically Red Scare Volume 2. Like the counter propaganda against China is like, oh, China is bad to all the young people. So that creates a really unhealthy into their mindset about a prejudice about China and unwilling to learn about these different type of political systems that might have some policies that could be used in the United States. So
Excellent point. Basically, there are a lot of lies about a lot of things in politics in the United States. Because if you have a system that's based on special interests, the special interests try to hide.
yeah,
They want their benefits without saying, "You see, I run the government." So we have a set of falsehoods uh, that keep uh, clarity at a distance,
right.
actually.
Yeah.
And so it takes some effort, but as you say, the anti-China propaganda is really heavy and very intense right now by people who know nothing about China or its history or its economic successes in the last 40 years or the hard work of the people.
Right. And how do we counter those misinformation?
I think we have first any lies need to be called out. So I try to do that on a daily basis, uh, and through articles and books and speeches. But I think it's also important that young people make direct contacts and use the digital connections across schools. So University of Michigan and Tsinghua University
Yep.
working together, discussing, and so forth. Somehow making such projects, both economic, cultural, business, technological, I think would be a big help. But our government is really aiming to, uh, as you say, scare people
Right.
rather than to really educate them.
Yeah. And the penultimate question is, where do you see the economy, the world economy, in sustainable development ways to achieve in 5 to 10 years?
The good sign is that we have so much new good technology, 5G, low cost renewable energy, robotics, many new approaches to problem solving. Uh, we really could make the energy transformation to safe energy at low cost. And this is the most important point: use our knowledge and deploy it at scale. But the challenge is conflict, division, vested interests, uh, greed that impedes us from using these solutions at scale. So it's not even possible to predict the future with any insight,
Yeah.
because we could have a good future with big solutions, or we could have a very broken, divided, dangerous future, and we have to fight for the good one. And that's why this is more of a question of effort than prediction.
Yeah. So last of all, so what is one message that you will want to share with all the young viewers that are aspiring to be, great economists and entrepreneurs?
Well, go be the best you can, but serve the common good as you do it. Uh, don't lose sight of the fact that we are in an interconnected world. We need global problem solving. We need friendships across nations. All this talk of war and conflict and division is extremely dangerous and completely unnecessary. And so go be champions of sustainable development, use new technologies, be great entrepreneurs, but always do it in a peaceful and cooperative mindset, not doing it because we have to beat the other side, but because it's good for the world.
Yep. Thank you so much, Professor Sachs, for today's interview. I'm really honored to have you here.
Great
And
to be with you, and thank
yep,
you for all that you're doing, and to all
yep,
the people listening in.
yep.
Take
Thank you.
care.